globally, disengagement rate is over 20% of people in the workforce. And actually 13% only of the entire workforce are engaged actively.
So Max, why is employee engagement so important?
Well, guys, let me just share with you a little story here. This specific day, I was actually wearing a suit, and I decided, to walk into town and go to this department store. And walking around the men's department, there is this, wonderful young lady, beautiful made up, very elegant, and she's got a smile on, and she walks towards me. And I'm already, young as I am, single. I started already thinking, she might end up getting me to buy something, obviously. So I started getting a little bit worried as a poor student. She walks towards me and says, "Hey, how you doing? Did you find something?" I said, "Well, I'm still looking." And then all of a sudden, she gets closer to me. And now I'm already starting to think, this is gonna end up, towards a nice coffee or something. And what she does instead, she just puts her hand on my wrist and gets really serious and sad and looks to me and says, "I am so sorry I have to tell you this, but I am so miserable here that I can't take it another day. I can't get along with my colleagues, and I just don't like the job, and I really desperately need to change. You look like a business guy, and I was wondering desperately if I can ask you, do you have anything to recommend?" And obviously, my first thought, because I was totally frozen, was no coffee. And then the second thought was, poor student, how am I going to help you? Let's look at some of the numbers about the engagement, because you might say, why is this interesting? Why is this relevant? According to Gallup, globally, disengagement rate is over 20% of people in the workforce. And actually 13% only of the entire workforce are engaged actively. And the rest, what we would say, 60 to 70%, while the disengaged ones are actually going around. Now let's look at some of the other numbers that is behind this. Absenteeism, which is on very high level as well, and that costs only in the US again annually $84 billion, according to Gallup. So we're talking really billions, and it's the same case when you look at Europe and other regions. So this is nothing we could just skip. And then we have obviously staff turnover, which is another thing to think about, and it's also relevant. So you might say, okay, that's great, but how come engagement and employee engagement actually makes a difference here, and what's the relevance as a whole? But then what we look at is employee experience and employee engagement are actually very much connected, obviously. And what are they connected to, which is something we look a lot into, is customer experience and service comes as driven fundamentally from employee engagement and the employee experience. So already if you're lacking in the engagement and the experience there, you're going to have a bad impact in your customer experience and your overall service. And what do they create? Obviously, as a next step is customer and employee satisfaction, loyalty, and retention, both the employees and the customers. So we're already seeing the trickle-down effect of the bad situation of disengagement. And then you take it to the next step, we're talking productivity, and everybody says, according to research, that engaged and happy employees are actually 12 times more.
So going to the financial industry, how does this relate to it?
Exactly. So let's look at service level, for instance. You got 20% of the customers that leave you for a competitor, they actually leave because of service and the level of service, which is, again, as we said, directly connected to the engagement. For instance, turnover rates, I wouldn't imagine the financial industry to be on one of the industries that has the highest level of turnover. Number one, first of all, in all the industries is hospitality, but the nature of hospitality makes it a business an industry where you have a lot of turnover in general. And they're at 29% plus of turnover in staff. But then right after it, you get financial and banking industries. And they're at 17.3%, where generally we always say that around 10% is where you want to be. So that's certainly another number that connects again to the productivity, profitability. And then we get to the reputation part where ever since the crisis of 2008, things hasn't changed that much. The insecurity in the market is great. And if you got disengaged employees that are constantly worrying about their jobs and the situation they're in, you're going to miss out on that. And the reputation obviously is going to be impacted. And the final thing that I really think is really interesting is disengaged employees commit 100 times more errors at work versus engaged ones.
Thank you, Max, for joining us in our studios.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for today's interview, but don't forget to click back on Dukascopy TV for more programs like this. Goodbye for now.